Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the continuation of the discussion on the foundational texts of Indian philosophy. This meeting will be recorded and it will be posted on YouTube. If you have missed any of the previous discussions, you may find it on YouTube. If you have any questions, there would be a question and answer segment at the end of this discussion segment. If you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourselves and ask. If you're not speaking, please mute yourselves in order to minimize the disturbances. Please use the raise hand feature of Zoom in order to maintain the queue. Thank you very much.
Recording in progress.
Thank you, Prajwal, for the introduction. Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmaswarupine avatar varishtaya ramakrishnaya te namaha Sruti smriti purananam alayam karunalayam namami bhagavat padam shankaram lokashankaram. So we are continuing this discussion on perhaps the most important philosophical foundational work of Advaita Vedanta, Vedanta in general. That is Brahma Sutras. Now, before we proceed further, I wanted to make a few important observations, and I want to speak something about the hermeneutical tools of Vedanta, because this is of great importance in understanding Vedanta philosophy. You often hear and you read about many unpleasant observations about Advaita Vedanta. I have heard many scholars, or rather the so-called scholars in India, who have not really studied this text from a teacher according to the traditional disciplines and methods, and frequently writing their thesis in English, mostly in English, without actually being able to write anything in Sanskrit or going through the foundational text. And this is true in Western academic circles also. Lot of misunderstandings about Vedanta philosophy. Now, one important reason for this misunderstanding is very simple. That is, they are not aware of the traditional hermeneutics of Vedanta. At the very beginning, I shall explain to you what it means in the field of study. Hermeneutics developed in the Western world along with the dialectical or philosophical discussions in biblical academic circles. So in biblical hermeneutics, there are certain steps that they follow. And if you really want to understand the theological or the philosophical principles of Christian theology, or the philosophical ideas linked to Christian theology, then you should know the hermeneutics of Christian theology. Of course, you don't have to study hermeneutics to enter the kingdom of heaven. For that, you need to be a good Christian, which is totally different from being a theologian. Now, in biblical theology, you find these steps like the literal meanings, the allegorical meanings, the moral or ethical meanings, and the what we call the anagogical or spiritual implications of words and statements. It's very important to remember that in Vedanta hermeneutics that we are going to discuss, we are not talking about finding the meaning of words. That's important, but there are other criteria employed for that purpose. Or rather, to put it in simple language, understanding the cultural context, the historical context, and frequently the anthropological context of biblical statements. And then, of course, literary context is important, making observations and coming to your own conclusions. This is the standard method employed in Christian theological discussions. Now, when you take up a book like Brahma Sutras, the original sutras were written thousands of years ago. The most celebrated commentary was written in 8th century AD by Shankaracharya. Now, if we don't understand this hermeneutical tradition in Vedanta, then try to study Vedantic texts and draw our own conclusions based on our own common sense and frequently our own prejudice. That leads to a lot of misunderstanding. But one important line of demarcation, the fundamental difference between biblical hermeneutics and Vedantic hermeneutics is very simple. That is, in biblical hermeneutics, studies are still being made. In fact, 19th century, in 20th century, there are many great philosophers, Germans, French, Italians, and others who made significant contributions, mostly European theologians, to biblical hermeneutics. Now, that kind of ongoing development or evolution has not happened in Vedantic hermeneutics. I shall give an example. The subject that we are going to discuss, that means we are going to discuss the 6 tools, hermeneutical tools in Vedanta philosophy or any system of Indian philosophy, not Vedanta alone, but all systems of Indian philosophy. These ideas were first proposed by a 2nd or 3rd century Mimamsa philosopher, ritualistic philosopher. His name was Kumarila Bhatta. 2nd or 3rd century AD. And he was the one who actually proposed this. And that is what we are still following. And that continues to be the foundational principle of Vedantic hermeneutics. We are coming to that. Now, why this is very important? In the Brahma Sutras that we are going to discuss, there are 555 sutras. And we will refer to many sutras, but primarily we are going to focus on the first 4 sutras because they together contain the essence or the foundation of Advaita Vedanta. Now, in the entire text, in Shankaracharya's commentary on 555 sutras, he quotes from all the 4 Vedas. Isha Upanishad, that is from Shukla Yajurveda, Keno Upanishad is Samaveda, Kathopanishad is Krishna Yajurveda, Prashnopanishad is Atharvaveda, Mundaga, again Atharvaveda, Mandukya is also Atharvaveda, Taittiriya Krishna Yajurveda, and then of course Aitareya is from Rigveda, Chandogya is from Samaveda, that is Chandogya Upanishad, and also Brihadaranyaka, which is again from Shukla Yajurveda. And also he quotes from many other texts, many other smaller Upanishads which are not so well, not so well known. Now, and on the basis of all these mantras which he quotes from different scriptures, he comes to a conclusion. Now, to give an example of the important role played by these hermeneutical tools in Advaita Vedanta, I am today going to focus on the 4th sutra, Tattu Samannayat. That's a sutra we are going to take up. An example. How all these 6 tools can be employed. And frequently these 6 tools of hermeneutics are also used in discussing, analyzing the meaning of Mahavakyas. For example, Tattum Asi. That you are. The all-pervading, the immanent, the transcendental reality that you are searching, that is actually non-distinct from yourself, in your own body mind complex, if you exclude all these external, the outer shells, these external elements like emotions, feeling, body, mind complex, etc., then what remains is the divine spark. And that is the same. This an instruction is given by Uddaraga to Shvetaketu in Chandogya Upanishad. So this is a classic example of application of these 6 hermeneutical tools. Now, we are going to focus on one sutra. The sutra is Tattwamayanandaji. That, but it is the main purport or the central theme. What it means is, and Shankaracharya says, Sarvesham Vedanta Vakyanam Brahmani Eva Talparyaka. If you take up all the important statements from Vedantic text, all the Upanishads, representing all the 4 Vedas, they have one central theme, one purport, one central focus, and that is nothing but the fact that Brahman is the only absolute eternal reality. Everything else is unreal or relative. This is the central principle, central theme that all the Upanishads are seeking, striving to establish. So it is called Samanvaya Adhyaya. There is a harmonization of all Vedantic statements on this central principle. They all point a finger to this supreme reality. The truth is one. Now, this is established by the application of the 6 hermeneutical tools, which are first proposed and referred to by Kumarila Bhatta in his celebrated work on Purva Mimamsa, Bhatta Mimamsa, because Mimamsa means the ritualistic philosophy, the philosophical system that is built around certain instructions and statements in the Vedas, which ask you to perform certain rituals, and depending upon the mantras mentioned in Samhitas, in the Brahmanas, Aranyakas, Brahmanas explain the way the rituals are to be performed. So, Kumarila Bhatta used this tool to establish his doctrine. What was his doctrine? Wherever there are high philosophical statements, they are only meant to tempt you to perform rituals, not to take you to the highest level of spiritual attainment. If there is any such statement, including the Mahavakyas, it is only a means to praise, to tempt you, to persuade you, to compel you to perform rituals. So it's called Shadvidha Lingani. Shadvidha Lingani. Linga means Linam Artham Gamayadi Idi Lingam. That means that is according to one earlier writer. Is a smaller book, Upavasha's Tika. Upavasha is called Tika Kara in the Brahma Sutra tradition. He lived before Shankaracharya. He wrote a small gloss on Brahma Sutras, which is not so very well known, and it is not so closely studied except by those who want to make comparative studies. So, 6 tools, 6 types of lingas. Linga means something that helps you to take, something that takes you to the real meaning, the real purport of Vedantic statements. So what are these 6 tools? That's what we're going to discuss now. It is called Upakrama Upasamkhara Abhyasa Apurvada Phalam Arthavadu Upapatticha Lingam Talperya Nirnaye. This is Kumarila Bhatta's statement. So what does it mean? Upakrama Upasamkhara. Upakrama means how a work, a text begins, or a chapter, or a particular context in a chapter begins. So this is very important. Now, the cultural context, the anthropological context, which are all linked to biblical hermeneutics. It's a very important literary context. In fact, literary meaning is not at all taken seriously. What is the implied meaning that is given more importance? Called lakshyartha. Vachyartha means literary meaning. But in biblical theology, of course, vachyartha, literary meaning of a word is taken. Then it is analyzed in the light of the socio-anthropological cultural context. For example, in the biblical literature, references to the neighboring states, that of course, what the place we now today, we now well known as Iraq, which is called Babylon, Sumeria, Judah, all these places are referred to in the biblical literature. And also statements and instructions and words and different statements in the St. Paul's letters, the Corinthians, Grecians, and so on. They're all being analyzed using certain tools like the literary, the cultural, the contextual meaning, and so on. But here it is different. How a text begins and how it ends. These are two important tools which are clubbed together. So Upakrama Upasamkhara. How it begins, how it concludes. It could be in the context of deciding the central theme of a particular text, or the central theme of a particular chapter, or a particular section within one chapter, within a chapter, in a certain chapter. So these are two. So, for example, in the context of Tattwamasi Mahavakya, Tattwamasi is an instruction. Tattwamasi is an instruction, Mahavakya. It was instructed by Uddalaka to his son Shvetaketu, who was a young boy who already studied a lot of scriptures, but returned home from the Vedic school full of pride and haughtiness. He was very haughty and proud. So Uddalaka asked him certain questions. Did you study this? Did you study this? He said, no, I didn't study all this. Maybe my teacher didn't know. So he was so haughty. Then finally Uddalaka slowly instructs him. And that's the context. So he begins the whole discussion. Well, Egartha Parivasanam Atrat Sadeva Saumya is like that. Sadeva Saumya. This is how the instruction begins. Idi Upakramaha Sa Atma Tattwamasi. Aidatatmimitam Satyam Sa Atma Tattwamasi. That's how it begins, that ends. So the section beginning with Sadeva Saumya and ends with Sa Atma Tattwamasi. It's a conclusion. Which means the idea that Brahman is only reality, Atman is only eternal reality, that is all pervading, that is immanent, that is transcendental. If you realize this, you will realize the spiritual oneness and unity of existence. It is you yourself. You don't have to look for that Brahman elsewhere. If you yourself practice certain disciplines, spiritual disciplines, and meditate, then one day you will realize the God you are looking for is within you as a divine spark. This is the beginning, the end of the particular section in the 6th chapter of Chandogya Upanishad. So that is the first and 6th are clubbed together. That is the beginning and the conclusion. The second verse is Upakrama Upasamhara Abhyasa. Abhyasa means repetition, constant practice. Abhyasa. You do your homework again and again. Suppose children study the alphabet, they write 50 times. That is Abhyasa. You go to gymnasium, you do exercise again and again. It's Abhyasa. Here, what is Abhyasa? This instruction is repeated by the teacher 8 times. In the 9th khanda of the 6th chapter, Uddalaka gives his first instruction, Tattwamasi. So it comes here, and then slowly Shetaketu understands it. And so Abhyasa means repetition. So it is the first instruction is given in the 8th khanda. From 9th khanda onwards, this instruction is repeated again and again. So this is the example for Abhyasa. Apurvata means something unique about a text. Suppose you're teaching a text. How do you find what is the central theme? The central theme you can find what is the teaching unique to that text. What's the idea which is mentioned only in that text and nowhere else. So that is an example for Apurvata, which means the something unique, something which is not mentioned elsewhere. Apurvata phala. Phalam means the result. What is the result? What is the ultimate result of this instruction? In the context of the Tattwamasi Mahavakya Upadesha instruction, the result was, at the end of this instruction, Shvetaketu was convinced that within him that divine reality is there. So that was the central theme of the instruction. Phalam. So then another one is Arthavada. Arthavada means when particular idea is taken and it is extolled, it is praised. This is what you should aim at. The idea is repeated again and again. One central idea is extolled, focused, repeated, and that comes at the beginning, that comes at the end, and the idea and that instruction that the teacher wants, the author wants, the writer wants, the reader to understand, or the teacher wants the student to understand, is repeated again and again. And that experience, that idea is considered to be the benefit, the result of studying the book or listening to the instruction. Upapatti means logical analysis. So the point is, Upakrama Upasamhara Abhyasa Apurvada Phalam Arthavada Upapatti. Arthavada means praising. Upapatti means logical analysis. So what is the central idea that the author of the book or the text wants to emphasize again and again? This is a way of putting forward the central, focusing on the central purpose. Another important part of it is, along with that, there are certain qualifications mentioned which are essential for a student to understand the meaning of the particular book. For example, Brahma Sutras, any book for that matter. It is called Adhikari. The person should be ready for it, not ready or fit intellectually, He is ready to study the book, but intellectual willingness or intellectual fitness alone may not allow a student to understand the real meaning. For that, the student should also go through a kind of spiritual discipline. You should practice renunciation. He should have a strong desire for higher life, and then he should also practice certain moral disciplines, emotional disciplines. It is called samadhi sarka sambati. Sama, dhamma, uparadi, tidiksha, shraddha, samadhanam. Means mental restraint, physical restraint, emotional restraint, and then concentration, a sense of sanctity and sacredness. So all these moral, ethical and spiritual qualities alone can actually enable a student to derive the meaning. This is something perhaps not at all mentioned, at least formally it's not mentioned in the other hermeneutics. That's why sometimes, Vedanta, when you study a Vedantic book, you find it can be called a theological book because it gives a lot of importance to revealed scriptures. So in that respect, you can call it a theological work. But it also challenges the statements. It says something is said in the Vedas. That's not enough. Sutya yuktya swanubhutya, Shankaracharya says. You read the scriptures, then you use your own reasoning power. And then swanubhuti means you should bring it into your own inner spiritual life. So there is always a connection between a student's ability to understand and interpret a book or certain teachings in a book and his intellectual capacity, but much more important, his spiritual qualification, spiritual fitness. That's called sadhana chatushtaya sampatti. Means you should have all these disciplines, moral disciplines, ethical disciplines, and so on. So adhikari, so means that one should be fit for it, for that study of the book in all these respects. Vishaya means the subject matter. One should know what the central theme, it's a general idea what it means. Then he should also prayojanam, he should know what benefit he is going to get out of this spiritual realization, whatever it is. So always some kind of link with spirituality. Now, I can give a few examples from Upanishad literature. How Shankaracharya takes up some of these statements. Now please listen. Later on, when I deal with Ramanuja's philosophy, which is a very profound devotional philosophical system, Visishta Advaita, Ramanuja quotes not only from Upanishads, but he also quotes from other non-Sanskrit devotional classics, and he comes to a conclusion that the ultimate reality is one supreme God who has attributes, and from him the whole creation and all the jivas and all the entire jagat, the creation evolves. That is his conviction. So you can like in Ramanuja, Madhva, Vallabha, Nimbarka, all of them use these tools. But it's very important that these Shadvidhalingani, these 6 tools of hermeneutics are very important in deriving at the correct meaning of scriptural statements. This is a very, very important point. I can give just one example to begin with. In Shankaracharya's commentary on the first sutra, second sutra, Janmadhyasya, and also first sutra somewhere else, he quotes one statement from Taittiriya Upanishad. This is Krishna Yajurveda. Now, to drive home the idea that this particular mantra shows that the central purpose of the scriptures is to realize Brahman. So a boy, a student, goes to his father, Bhriguvai Varunihi Varunam Pidaram Upasasara Adhihi Bhago Brahmedi. That's how it begins. A small boy, his name is Bhrigu, his father and also his teacher, Varuna. He goes to Varuna and asks one question. Please teach me the truth of supreme reality. Then the teacher tells him, Yatova imani bhudani jayende yena jatani jivandi yat prayandi abhisamvisandi tad vijijñāsasva tad brahma. What is Brahman? That supreme reality from which all these phenomenal entities emerge and by which all these are being sustained and towards which everything gets dissolved. That is Brahman. That you should realize. Tapasa Brahma Vijijñāsasva. By spiritual disciplines, meditation, contemplation, austerities, you can realize this truth. Now Shankaracharya quotes this in his Bhashya, Janmadi asyataha, Janmadi asyataha. From where all these created universe emerge. And Janmadi means beginning, birth, existence, dissolution, and also rebirth. What is the central point of all this? Now, this statement is taken at the central teaching of Krishna Yajurveda. But there are many like that. An example is given here. This is one thing. And then again, you find one very well-known statement is there. It's from Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. In the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, for example, in the third chapter, there is a discussion, a debate between a great philosopher called Yajnavalkya and Gargi. Now, Shankaracharya, for example, he will quote this statement. He is quoting all these from different Upanishads. Edasya va aksharasya prashasane gargi surya chandramaso vidhuto tishtadaka edasya va aksharasya prashasane gargi dyava pridhivyo vidhade tishtadaka edasya va aksharasya prashasane gargi nimesha muhurta ahoratrani ardhamasa masa ritava samvatsara idi vidadasishtandi edasya va aksharasya prashasane gargi prachyo anya nadya sendendeshu edebhya parvadebhya pradicya anyah yam Disham anu edasya vaksharasya prasasane gargi dadado manishya prashamsandi yajmanam deva dirvimpi diro anyayataha. It is a long mantra, but I shall explain. Yajnavalkya is telling Gargi, the great learned debater, look here Gargi, in whose presence to be literally even to under whose presidentship all these different entities, this earth, the space, the heavens, the stars, the moons, the time, different seasons, the created universe, weeks and months and years, all these are mentioned here. And under whose presidency, under whose controllership, under whose presence, all these different entities function, move, and exist as if regulated and controlled by one supreme intelligence. That is Brahman. Like that it goes on. Not only that, how rivers flowing to the east and rivers flowing to the west. It's a context of Indo-Gangetic basin, rivers like Ganga flow towards the east and rivers like Sindhu, etc. flows to the west like that. So how all this happened? Who is the inner controller of all this? If you realize this, you understand there is one supreme transcendental reality. So all these mantras are brought together to establish the fact that there is one supreme reality. When you realize this, then you realize that supreme reality. It is the ultimate seer, ultimate hearer, ultimate perceiver, ultimate intelligence. This is how, as I mentioned earlier, Samanya Adhikarana is built up. Of course, all these mantras are quoted again and again along with other mantras. So these mantras, these Upanishad mantras are taken and they are quoted and the meaning is given, and finally the commentator will tell you they all show that behind and beyond all these external pluralistic diverse entities, there is one supreme harmonizing unifying reality. And as I mentioned earlier, the Chandogya Upanishad called Abhyasa, Navakrutva it means. Navakrutva means the statement is made 9 times by Uddalaka. If you have any more interest, you can listen, you can read this chapter 6, which has got 16 sections called Khandas. From 9 to 16th, in these 9 sections, Khanda means sections, a few mantras together, one section. There is one instruction, and the same instruction is repeated 8 times, one after another. In each repetition, one more example is given. In the light of a fresh and new example, this idea is emphasized. What is the idea? That God you are looking for, put in simple language, the God whom you are looking for, you are praying to, He is not limited to the temple or a church, but He is an all-pervading reality, and also He is present in you. So that's a statement, Saya esha anima aidadatmimidam sarvam tasatyam sa atma tattwamasi shetaketu. So you find upakrama upasamhara. Sadeva Saumya, that's how it begins, upasamhara, because this is repeated in the last 16th section also. And Uddalaka says, and Shvetaketu finally realizes the truth as a result of hearing and again constant contemplation and spiritual disciplines. This is how this Brahma Sutra is built up. So very, very interesting thing. Another very important tool, as I mentioned, I just referred to earlier, is this idea of going for implied meaning, going beyond literary meaning. So in the biblical hermeneutical tradition, literary meaning is very important. But there are different ways of getting an implied meaning from a literary meaning. So for example, this mantra, Tattwamasi, all these 4 Mahavakyas, Tattwamasi is from Chandogya Upanishads, Samaveda, Aham Brahmasmi is from Shukla Yajurveda, it is actually from Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, and Ayam Atma Brahma is from Mandukya Upanishad, it is from Atharvaveda, Prajnanam Brahma is from Aitareya Upanishad, it is from Rigveda. Now all these 4 important statements, remember they are all tiny statements, Prajnanam Brahma, not even one sentence, Tattwamasi, like a phrase, Aham Brahmasmi, is also very small expressions, Ayam Atma Brahma. Now these statements, how do you make a meaning out of it? So certain tools are being introduced. What are the tools? So how to derive this meaning? Advaitic meaning. The Advaitic meaning is this. If you analyze your own true nature, if you exclude from you all these external factors like body, mind, complex, emotions and feelings, then there is something in you which is a divine spark, Atman Brahman, which is all pervading, immanent and transcendental. But if you take the literary meaning, people will laugh at you. The all-pervading Brahman is you. It's because the literary meaning of Tattwamasi is almost laughable. You know what it means? Tat means God. Tu means you. So you are God. So people often make fun of Advaita. Advaita tells you, you are God. Actually, that's not implication. That ridiculous meaning is a result of literary interpretation. And Vedanta philosophers tell you, do not take the literary meaning. But what you should do? You should take the implied meaning. Literary meaning in Sanskrit called Vachyartha. Vachya means what the word literally means. Lakshyartha means by implication what that particular expression implies. So, literary meaning is you are God. You go to Kaiser, you go for treatment, you take vaccination for COVID. If somebody tells you are God, it is ridiculous. So what is the implication? No. If from you remove all these external upadhis, means limiting adjuncts. Body, mind, complex, emotion, everything. Behind all this, there is something in you which helps you, which enables the mind to function, which enables the mind to think, which enables the intelligence, the intellect to decide, which gives you the ability to walk. That when that divine spark leaves the body-mind complex, you can't walk, you can't think, nothing happens. So what is that? That is the immanent, effulgent, spiritual reality. It is called Antaryami. Antaryami. That Antaryami, that divine principle in you is the same as the divine principle that is present everywhere. So that's the real meaning of Tattwamasi. The same is true of Aham Brahmasmi also. So what it means is, in the Vedantic hermeneutics, you should also remember that it's not just Upakrama Upasamhara Abhyasa Apurvada Phalam Arthapadu Upapaticha Lingam Talparya Nirnaya. The 6 tools are there. Beginning, conclusion, repetition, uniqueness, the ultimate result, and again what idea is being praised, and again what logic, to apply what idea the author uses his logical analysis. What idea is being logically analyzed as a central theme. You take all this, that is central theme of the book. This is an important thing. So, that is one school of hermeneutics. The second one is going beyond the literary meaning. Going beyond literary meaning. So, here also, if you take the literary meaning, it makes no sense. So, you go for the implied meaning. This is an important thing. Another important tool, hermeneutical tool, third in importance, is that a person should be qualified not only in terms of intellectual prowess, but also in terms of spiritual fitness. I don't know how well this is grasped. If our mind is confused, if you are greedy, if you have no sense of renunciation, no sense of sanctity and sacredness, no respect for the tradition, and you read a book, you read, let's say, Sermon on the Mount, you don't get the full meaning out of it. I'm just giving Christian context. But if you have a sense of sanctity and sacredness, and sense of spiritual concentration, and read that book, read that a few words, sentences, you get more meaning out of it. Actually, purely in intellectual terms, when you go to university, you are going for the masters. Your ability to do well in the class depends upon how well you have done in your previous class, actually. This is an important thing. Otherwise, we won't be able to do that. There's a qualification at the intellectual level. But qualification need not necessarily be limited to the intellectual level. Qualification in terms of moral and spiritual fitness. For that, one should practice a sense of renunciation, sense of sanctity. Well, those who want to take the spiritual life, they should certainly be able to discard all other things and turn their full focus on spirituality. When that happens, you find mind also becomes more mature, more level-headed, and also strong urge for higher spiritual realization. Buddha had it, that's why he sat under the tree. And ihasane sushyuti me shariram tugusti mamsam chivilayam chayatu aprapi siddhim bhujan madullabham naivasanat kayamataschalishide. Ledda Vistara says. Buddha sat under a tree. He was fully fit. Adhigari, Vishaya, Sambandha, Prayojana. The first qualification is one should be Adhigari, means one should be ready, qualified. Buddha was qualified because he walked 1,000 miles all the way from Lumbini to Bodh Gaya. It's a long distance. Unless he is spiritually, morally fit, he won't take the sacrifice, walking such a long distance. And when we have that, then all other qualifications together. One important thing about these four important qualifications, the sadhana chatushta sambatti, linked to adhigari concept, is if you get established in one of the four disciplines, then automatically we get well established in the other three disciplines also. So this is the Vishaya, Sambandha, Prayojana. This is an important thing to remember. That means our fitness has something to do with our lifestyle, what we think, what we consider to be the highest goal in life. All these are important in making us ready for the highest spiritual study. So this is an important thing to remember. Now I shall take just one sutra. I started this. It's very interesting. The first one I had just referred to, Adhado Brahma Jignasa, the first sutra. So, in the beginning itself, is a discussion, interesting discussion. Discussion is, if Brahman is everywhere, and we are also Brahman, why should we make an inquiry after the nature of Brahman? So the idea is, normally, if we understand this as an intellectual concept, it doesn't make any sense. As we understand intellectually, we also start moving in our inner life. So there are two movements. At the level of intellect, we advance further, study, understand, and enrich ourselves intellectually. But along with that, you feel a person who is sincerely dedicated to higher studies, study of higher subjects, study of great persons, great ideas which are linked to renunciation, sanctity, sacredness, purity, and so on. If the person is really interested, that interest will slowly help him to start moving in his own inner space, in his own inner life. Slowly our mind becomes calm and quiet, and then what happens? Slowly we will discard what is against, what is opposed to spiritual life, and then we will uphold what is appropriate and necessary for spiritual life. Called, the first one is Nitya Anitya Vastu Viveka, the second one is Ihamutra Bhara Bhoga Viraga. When this happens, mind becomes calm and quiet. We develop an inner faculty of self-restraint, an inner maturity, an ability to feel calmness and quietude even in the midst of difficult situations. And that will be further enriched by a strong urge for liberation called mumukshutvam. 4. Then, and when this happens, what do? Then we look for some place where we can read some great book, or we can listen to some talks or something on this subject that are conducive to spiritual life. And we will slowly start internalizing what we study. It is called Sravanam, Mananam, Nidhyasam. These 7 disciplines. These are also important hermeneutical tools. That's why I should say in Advaita hermeneutics, there are intellectual qualifications necessary. No doubt about it. Medhavi Purusho Viddan Uhapoka Vijakshanaha Adhigari Atma Vidyayam Ukta Lakshana Lekshitaha Bhashyagara says in the Vivekchudamani. Who is a real fit person? Who is able to interpret scriptures properly? So he says he should have intelligence, but he should also be knowledgeable, but he should also live a pure life. Because purity of life, purity of thought, purity of emotions also give a special ability, faculty and capacity for our intellect to understand certain things which we may not understand otherwise. Because it's called Medha in Sanskrit language. Medha has got 2 meanings. One is purely intellectual meaning, Gandha Dharana Shakti, ability to read, understand and retain our brain. But there is something else. Medha also means something that's purifying, something that is refining, that something that makes us more refined and sophisticated. So all these important qualifications are also necessary tools for interpreting scriptures. The main reason, as I mentioned in the beginning, Vedantic hermeneutics was not enriched by new contributions during the last several hundred years. But if you look at a lot of French and German theologians have come forward to enrich and to reinterpret, to expand the horizon of Christian hermeneutics. So you find if you read the Brahma Sutras, especially Brahma Sutra more than, and Upanishads, Gita much less, but Upanishads and Brahma Sutra when you read, it's a harmony of the theological and also the metaphysical, both. You find statements which are sharper than the statements of Kant in Critique of Pluralism. And there are statements, in fact, these ideas are put forward. For example, there were certain schools of Indian materialism in ancient times called Charvaka, hedonists, Lokaitika called. They also put forward arguments. One funny argument is, they are actually trying to contradict the views of the ritualists. The ritualistic philosophers will argue, if you sacrifice some animal, this ancient times, not modern time, if you perform certain Vedic rituals which involve animal sacrifices, then your grandparents will go to heaven, or you can go to heaven. So these are the views of the ritualists. I am giving some example of the arguments that Shankaracharya refers to. Then the hedonists argue, in that case, why don't you kill your father? He can go to heaven. So if you kill an animal, the animal also will go to heaven. Then why don't you kill a grandfather? Why don't you do that? So you find cutthroat arguments coming from cutthroat hedonists and utilitarians and materialists, Indian materialists. They were much more reckless than many modern materialists. So, what I mean to say, you find both theology and also philosophy. The rational philosophy of modern idealists, German idealists, you find, and also there are views which closely resemble the views of J.S. Mill, the utilitarian views, and also the highest transcendental ideas, both you find. It's a unique work. Thank you. I will further expand a few more and say a few more things, then conclude this subject, then come back to the text again. You are most welcome to ask questions. Yeah.
Very fascinating. Thank you, Maharaj. David, please please go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello, Swami.
Yeah.
I had well, the first question I had was, it seems that the Hindu, the Vedas and the sort of the overall Hindu approach, the Sanatana Dharma approach to spirituality is very experientially based, whereas the Christian is very sort of experientially based. It's almost anti-mystical.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of theology, but if you talk about, realize, like there's one passage I think in the Bible where it says there are some who can realize God or find the kingdom of heaven here while they're still on earth. They completely ignore those statements, and yet in the Hindu scriptures that seems to be the Jnana-kanda seems to overwhelmingly more important than the karma-kandas.
Yeah.
Why this difference?
I basically, the one important reason for this difference is Christianity is essentially coming from one great individual prophet, and these teachings, as interpreted by his contemporaries or by the members of the hierarchy that came to be established in his name. That's why, not he done that he founded, yet came to be established in his name, mostly under, to be very precise, after Constantine's conversion, which was really a military strategy. His conversion was more of a military strategy. He was an outstanding, so for that he wanted to unify the Christians. He wanted them to unite under him in his fight against the barbarians. That was the time when the barbarians from the east were assaulting Rome, so he used to, that's one thing. So a hierarchy was established and the door was closed. No more arguments, no more discussion, nothing of the kind. See, you can remember, Shankaracharya says, don't blindly follow the scriptures. Now, can you think of anything more revolutionary? He is considered to be the champion of orthodoxy. But for his times, he was a great revolutionary, a radical revolutionary. Srutya, Yuktya, then Sruti means scriptures, revealed scriptures, like biblical scriptures, for example. And then Yuktya, use your reasoning. And Swami would then bring it to your own experience. I think the experience aspect can be accepted only if individuals are given freedom in religious matters. So Swami Vivekananda makes an interesting observation. He says, liberty is the first condition of growth. And then Vivekananda goes on analyzing, as a great interpreter and a student of history that he was, he says in Western world, there was more freedom at a social level, at a society. There was no rule against crossing the ocean as it was there among Hindus. Not rules about eating food, taking bath, how many times you should wash your hands, all this sort of things, So Western people were very free in this respect. Remember, in India, there was freedom at a religious level. The same family, if you go to the place I'm coming from, Kerala, and also Bengal, these two states, maybe almost like a museum exhibition for communist rule, because they don't exist anywhere else in this world. So Kerala is some kind of a museum, a political museum where you can still see a communist elected. At least he claims to be one, though it's not at all the kind of humanistic communism that Marx embodied. More, closer to the Stalinistic version, so to speak. I'm going further beyond this. But the point is, you can see in such a place you find all these people go to temples also. The same family, one person, the father worshipping Shiva, the son going to Krishna temple, and the daughter or some relative going to another goddess temple, and the eldest one is a communist leader also. So you can find this. Now, such a thing would have been impossible in a culture where Inquisition was so notorious. You can imagine. Even grandchildren can report a grandmother to the inquisitors. In Spain, all these things happen in Spain and France. So there was no freedom in the field of religion in Europe. There was no freedom in the field of society, social, cultural aspects in India. Swamiji says this contrast. So where there is freedom, there will be growth. So many mystics in India, there are hundreds, thousands. Europe also, there were many, but they were all persecuted. They received only post-mortem recognition. So that's an important thing to remember. I think, first of all, one founder, one book, and one belief system, and again the finality of Christ, that idea, coupled with this radical sinfulness of man, which is Augustinian idea. So that's an important thing to remember. Actually, these things can really cause problems, finality of Christ. So Gandhi had a great respect for Christ. Vivekananda had a great respect for Christ. Sri Ramanujan's disciple Keshav Chandra Sen, he was an outstanding scholar in biblical literature. In fact, the Gospel of Sri Ramanujan was written by M. Mahendranath Gupta. He was a great scholar in the Bible. Now the point is, and still they were Hindus. They were going to temples and all that. I think that may not be possible in any tradition where you think only in terms of one book, one version, one interpretation of God. There are many conflicts on whether worship should be this way, that way. Among Hindus also it is there, but then there is also a much bigger reason, umbrella. So that's an important thing to remember.
Yeah, it makes sense what you're saying, because I'm thinking in Judaism, you don't have one prophet, you have many prophets. So there's a lot of argumentation. You can still be Jewish, even if you're an atheist.
Yeah.
So, and yet, like in Islam or Christianity, it's one prophet and it's very strict. There's not freedom of thought. So that makes sense that if there was only one prophet or one God.
Yeah. If you read the development of Islam, there were inter-tribal warfare. And so these are all important. So tribalism sometimes influences religions like Christianity and Islam at that time. But in Christianity, the ideal of Jesus Christ as a great spiritual person who is a source of inspiration not only to baptize Christians but others. So that's an important thing. I believe you see, you don't find any religion other than Hinduism where Christ can come often, no problem. There's so many sages, all right, fine. So they are not surprised. But the finality, the doctrine of finality of Christ, that's important. And the consequent exclusivism can be problematic in many ways.
And it seems like since the Buddhists don't consider Buddha an incarnation, this seems like there's a lot more freedom in Buddhism as well than in
Buddhism,
Christianity.
they're very pluralistic, very broad-minded. They don't have this kind of one-sided approach. No, don't find. Yeah.
Is I know in the Vedanta societies we see the focus on experiencing God, an ubati. Do we see, is that in general understood in India, or is that very focused that only a few mystical kind of traditions really focus on an
It's a
ubati?
very relevant question. Now remember, if you look at India's history, there was never an occasion when people professing another non-Hindu religion came to India and were persecuted. It never happened in India. It never happened in India. There are 4 examples in our history. One is 400 BC, the first wave of migrants from Israel. The second one when Masada collapsed 71 AD. And then there was the Christian migration 51, 54 AD. And Joseph, the doubting Thomas. Sorry, not Joseph. Thomas. Saint Thomas they call. And then there were the Parsis, the Zoroastrians came in 7th century AD. They came to Saurashtra coast. So there were so many instances. Now, they were received and people are not particularly interested what kind of religion they practice. Oh, they have their religion, okay, they practice, that's all. So, I think that's because as a cultural trend, as an inner current, a cultural current, it was already there in the mindset. Oh, it's all fine. I don't think it was due to any conviction of the unity and oneness of all religions. No. But there's an inner current is there. That all people professing, they worship in their way, they pray to their idea of God. If they live a good life, fine, wonderful. So, that's an important thing. So, I told you there are many statements in Bhagavata Purana which says, Aham sarveshu bhudeshu bhudatmanam kridalayam that's arhaye danamanabhyam maitriya abhinnena chakshusha. So Lord Krishna says, I have built my home in the hearts of all human beings, devoted, pure human beings, and you worship, you respect, you honor, you be compassionate towards all beings, because everyone as in his heart, everyone has my presence. My presence is there in the hearts of everyone. There are many statements in the Bhagavata Purana. Being a good human being is the essence of a good devotee. Just be a good human being. You don't become devotee and then become a good human being. No. You become a good human being, you automatically become a devotee. Krishna doesn't even talk about the need to worship him alone. No. Aham uchavachai dravyehi kraya utpannayanake. This is a statement. Natushi archidotchayam bhudatma avamaninaha. What means, aham uchavachaihi dravyehi kriyaya utpannayanake. See, natushe archidotchayam means, what it means is, aham natushe, I will not be pleased, I will not be happy. By what? If you perform elaborate rituals, puja, worship, millions of dollars, you spend huge things, I won't be happy. Natushe archidotchayam. Buddhagrama avamaninaha. Buddhagrama means the community of living beings, not just human beings alone. If you hurt and insult any living being, that's called Buddhagrama. Avamana means insulting, dishonoring. If you perform huge rituals to please me, apparently, and then you insult any or hurt, do harm to any living being, natushe, I won't be happy, I won't be pleased by that worship. Just imagine. So, don't come to my temple. Take care of people around you, and I am happy. You ignore people around you, insult them and come to my temple and pray. I won't care for you. I will close my door before you. But you can imagine. So being a good human being is the essence of devotion. But remember, this is not a statement coming from a jnani. It is not a Vedantic statement. A statement given to bhaktas, devotees. So, being a good human being is the essence of spirituality, devotion. That's a very radical statement, really speaking. So,
Thank you, Maharaj. The next question is from Sri C. Gopinath.
Swamiji, earlier in today's talk, you mentioned that an important theme, probably the dominant theme in all the major Upanishads, is that Brahman is the only reality. Now, the Brahma Sutras is a collection of sayings and mantras from various Upanishads. Therefore, is there anything unique in the Brahma Sutras that you say will stand out different from the Upanishads? Or is it also the same theme as the Upanishads?
Brahma Sutras were interpreted by different Vedantins and different scholars. Shankaracharya, Ramanuja, Madhva, Baladeva, the Chaitanya tradition, Vallabha, Nimbarka, Vedanta, Pariyata, Saurabham, small book. So there so many interpretations of Brahma Sutras. So each of these great philosophers interpreted Brahma Sutras to drive home the idea that their teaching is the central theme of Brahma Sutras. So we are now giving an example of how these 6 tools of hermeneutics are employed to bring out the Advaitic idea by Shankara as an example. And also there is an important book called Sri Bhashyam. It's called Ramanuja. It's a very profound book. In that book, Ramanuja uses the same technique, these 6 hermeneutical tools, and he brings many statements from Upanishadic and also other statements to drive home this idea of Visishtadvaita. So like that, Madhvacharya, Nimbarka, all of them did that. So I was being a kind of just an example, that's all. The application of these 6 tools of hermeneutics. All these, I'm not taking side with one school, rather, just giving an example.
So the Brahma Sutras, you would say, doesn't have one unique message. It has multiple messages that different people have interpreted.
Yeah. Well, again, in India, if you go, depending upon your conviction, you would rather prefer Shankara is right, Ramanuja is right, Madhva is right. Personally, I have the conviction that the Advaitic interpretation seems to be most rational, because for one reason, I can give one reason. One test of the rationality of a teaching is it appreciated and understood across the borders of your own culture and tradition? Does it have a meaning and significance, application and recognition even among people who don't belong to Hindu tradition? Now, when you see, to give an example, Paul Brunton's story, how he discovered Ramana Maharshi. It's a very touching story. He was an Englishman living in New York, was a journalist, and he read something somewhere in an article about Ramana Maharshi. And Ramana Maharshi's teaching is nothing but the Advaita of Shankaracharya, So he was fascinated. So you find, so he could see that if you bringing Ramanuja, Madhva, Vallabha, Nimbarka, Chaitanya to America, you find they're all different devotional schools, and Catholic mysticism has produced many great saints who also taught great teachings like the bhaktas, the devotees of India, you can highly mystics. But nothing like Advaita, which tells you that You do not have to worship a personal deity. Nothing wrong in worshipping, but that's not the only foundation of spiritual progress. That is emphasized only by Advaita. So that is, it has got a fascination beyond, going beyond the immediate community of Indians or Hindus. So it's a universal application. That's what actually brought Vivekananda so much of recognition. Swami Vivekananda himself says this in one context. When he went back to India, many of other disciples of Sri Ramakrishna questioned him. You didn't teach about Sri Ramakrishna. You didn't teach about bhakti, taking holy names. You didn't teach those things. And you taught your own Vedanta. So why did you ignore teaching Sri Ramakrishna, his incarnation, things like that? Then Swami Vivekananda said, well, if you just bring one great spiritual teacher from India and he's teaching, they think, oh, we have our own Christ. We have St. Francis of Assisi, St. John of the Cross, St. Teresa of Avila, like that. St. Sri Ramakrishna, okay, that's all. But Swami Vivekananda, what he presented was this universal idea of oneness of existence, spiritual oneness of existence, which is the hallmark, with the special characteristics of Advaita humanism. The infinite oneness of the soul is the eternal sanction of all morality, all ethics, all good actions. Swami Vivekananda continues his arguments. See, if I have my own personal God, and if I am happy with him, he is happy with me, then why should I bother about those who don't belong to my group? I can do whatever I want. Swami Vivekananda, he goes on arguing. Then he says, Vedanta tells you humanity is one, existence is one. But again, another thing, Vedanta recognizes, respects, appreciates, and accommodates all other ideas also. Vedanta doesn't contradict or Vedanta is not in conflict with other ideas, but it goes beyond that. The transcendental aspect of Vedanta, the universal aspect of Vedanta. So I think that's why we feel that Advaitic doctrine seems to be the most sensible. The others are not wrong. Advaita doesn't say other views are wrong. That's another difference. Non-Advaitic doctrines tell you all other views are wrong. Advaita tell you they are not wrong. That's why Advaita seems to be more universal. I told you the Gaudapada's Kairigani's Bhasha is the Swasiddhanta Vyavasthasu Dvaitino Nischida Dridam Parasparam Viruddhindi Tairayam Na Viruddhide. So this Advaita Vedanta has no quarrel with anyone because all of the same Atman. So what caught the Western world and what impressed Paul Brunton, to give an example, Ramana Maharshi was a humble saint living Tiruvannamala. At that time he was an unknown person. But this journalist living in New York, he read about him and he was so fascinated. And he goes all the way to Chennai to meet him, to Tiruvannamala. You can imagine. Now, that is the uniqueness of Advaita. I mean, it catches any sincere seeker after truth. That's the greatness of it. I don't think other views are wrong. I have respect, great appreciation. I consider all views as correct. But Advaita accepts that all other views are also correct and wrong. Only when you go beyond that, you get a more complete picture. Other experiences are not wrong. They may be slightly incomplete. That's all. That's the thing. Otherwise, Brahma Sutra had, Upavasha, I mentioned, Tikakara, is a small gloss written by one great Saint Upavasha, pre-Shankarite times. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Shri Gopinath, do you have a follow-up? He's muted, but I think he said no.
I'm okay. Yeah.
All right, very
Yeah,
good. Maharaj, there are no questions online, but I'm going to I'm going to ask you this. I mean, this is unbelievably valuable roadmap for accessing the meaning, the fuller meaning of these texts. What a roadmap for students it is. My question is whether or not a genuinely heartfelt spiritual seeker, a student of these texts who has a taste for it, is it so that they tend to acquire or utilize, without necessarily realizing it, those 6 hermeneutical tools that you mentioned? Is there a natural tendency for those with a taste for the spiritual search to tend towards those methodologies?
Yeah. This is purely an academic tool, really, purely academic. But a very sincere student will certainly understand it, because he will be impressed by what he is ready for. Any book, he will be impressed, he will be captivated by what he is ready for. So there is that aspect, spiritual, purely spiritual aspect. But as a hermeneutical tool, the system, this 6 6 elements framework, it was developed by not Advaitins, by a cutthroat ritualist, Kumarila Bhatta. He was the one who referred to this almost 500 years before Shankaracharya. So, but again, the important point is, it is such a comprehensive method of understanding, going beyond the contextual meaning. See, in biblical discussions, they will discuss what this particular word meant in Old Hebrew and Old Testament, or in Aramaic, or what that word was, how the word was normally understood to be or interpreted by the ancient Sumerians or people living in Palestine, Judah. Like that, they go on elaborating. But here, the geographical, cultural barriers are totally ignored. A student, how he moves towards the book, that's a uniqueness. That's so universal about it. Yeah. Many books are even with German Herdinger. Many of the modern philosophers have written philosophical hermeneutics, theological hermeneutics, biblical hermeneutics. There are many branches, and new books are being written, even in 20th century. So, but here, this is like a old system, that the first recorded reference is in Kumarila Bhatta's works. And remains the same. Yeah. Okay. So
I still find it remarkable how liberating these Vedic hermeneutics are, in part because, as you said, it leaps off of even the literary analysis, which can have its own limitations, into a complete perspective. I mean, every functioning professional in any specialty, including artistic specialties or engineering, knows that to get the big picture, you have to leap out of the narrow confines of one perspective. So it is very liberating and very valuable for us to hear about it.
Thank you, Swami. Thank you, everyone. Namaskar. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. Announcement. The very important
Recording
announcement.
stopped.
Please listen. Announcements. There will be no class on the foundational text of Indian philosophy due to upcoming special events and my travels. So I'll be traveling again from February 26th onwards. For close to a month I will be away. So next time I will try to arrange a mechanism so that I can continue my classes even by traveling. So maybe this time I am not able to do that. So I'll be traveling, so there will be no class for more than a month. So the next foundational text of Indian philosophy class will be on March 26th. March 26th, 2023. So please remember, the next class will be on March 26th, 2023. Upcoming special events. Shivaratri. So Sunday, February 19th, Shivaratri, 7:30 p.m. New Temple. On Sunday, February 19th, we will celebrate Shivaratri, the night dedicated to Lord Shiva, with a worship at 7:30 p.m. at the New Temple. After refreshments, there will be chanting, reading and meditation in the auditorium till 10:30. So after puja, which begins at 7:30 p.m. in the evening, there will be meditation from 9 to 10:30. You can sit in the temple and meditate. The temple will close only at 10:30 p.m. The Sri Ramakrishna's birthday, Saturday, February 25th, 10 a.m. New Temple, Vellore Street, San Francisco. New Temple, not here. On Saturday, February 25th, a special worship will be performed in honor of Sri Ramakrishna's birthday at 10 o'clock in the morning. The program will also include meditation, chanting, devotional singing, readings from the life and teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, flower offerings by devotees, and take-out prasad. Child care will be provided. We hope that you will be able to join us on this most auspicious occasion, either in person or online. Please continue to monitor our website savedanta.org for the latest information. So then again, there will be no Bhagavad Gita class due to upcoming special events on Swamiji's travels. The next Bhagavad Gita class will be on March 31st, 2023. So please remember, the next class will be on March 2023. March 31st, 2023, 7:30 p.m. Upcoming special programs. Shivaratri, of course, you will mention Sri Ramakrishna. So please remember, there will be no Bhagavad Gita class till March 31st, 2023. And again, there will be no Indian philosophy class on Sundays at 6 p.m. The next class will be on March 26th, 2023. So, thank you. Okay. I will try to change this. I will try to arrange in such a way that I will be able to give classes even while traveling. So, okay, thank you. Namaskar.
Namaskar.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Namaskar. Namaskar. Namaskar.
Yeah.